Welcome to Guy Code, a podcast dedicated to imparting dad wisdom to my son, with your host, Koji Steven Sakai, and friends.
Welcome. This is Koji, and this is episode number 28 of the Guy Code. I wanted to impart all of my wisdom to my son, but of course, my son already thinks he knows more than me, and he's only 8 years old. So instead of trying to tell him now and having it go in one ear and out the other, I decided to record them all here with the hopes that maybe, just maybe, when he's ready, he'll listen to my advice in the future and not make the same stupid mistakes I did. I'll also bring on guests to impart their advice as well. I have no doubt their advice will be better than mine. This week, I brought on my best friend and somebody I've known since college, Max Gopalan. Hi, Max. How are you?
Hey, Coach. How you doing?
I am good. Max, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, sure. My name is Max. I have a 12-year-old son. His name is Aiden. And Koji and I have been friends since we were way more immature than our children are now. Just retired, I guess, 4 years ago from the business world. About to get back into it, but really took the time off because I wanted to spend more time with my son heading into his adolescence to really prepare him for jumping on in life. And so I thought it was funny when Koji reached out to me about this topic specifically, because as I started going through the list of what I want to make sure he definitely leaves with is knowledge, I just realized how much I need to read the list myself and probably should take my own advice. So thanks for the exercise. It's really
Yeah, that's always the way it is. I mean, this advice shows it's helped me a lot because the more advice I look into, the more I'm like, dude, I got to do more of this shit.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. Yeah.
So why don't we get into it a little bit? Why don't you start with your first piece of advice?
Sure. So I sent them in a random order. I think the one I want to start with first is I started this thing maybe a couple 6-7 years ago, where every time I brush my teeth, I think about what I'm grateful for. And it's one of those things where if you're too busy to actually sit down and do things that are going to improve your life, this is something that you can just think about on your thoughts while you're doing something manual. And the way that's affected me is that starting my day now, I just have such thicker skin and can deal with adversity and the things that are unplanned so much smoother because I already have this built up equity of gratitude going through just my day-to-day interactions. It changes my perspective on things that could be perceived as positive or negative. And then, to close the day with brushing your teeth with gratitude really just changes how you decompress before you go into rest. It's been one of the best just pushes of constant momentum for me ever since I started doing it.
Wow, that's really. What kinds of things are you grateful? What kinds of things do you say?
It's interesting because it changes all the time. Sometimes it could be a broad swath of here's all the things I'm grateful for that have happened. Or sometimes I'm just thinking about how lucky I am to have a son, right? Or how lucky I am to have a friend like you. Or how lucky I am to have the parents that I had, right? It could be anything, and it could be just focusing on one or more broadly on just the things that are on your mind. But it doesn't really seem to matter what my gratitudes are. Just the fact that I'm putting my mindset into a state of gratitude.
I love this. I've never heard this from anybody. So that's always great. What I've gone through, I don't know how many episodes, 26 episodes, 28 episodes. Yeah, this is the first time I've heard that. So I really appreciate that. It's kind of why, I don't know if you know, but me and my Takao, we pick up trash every week on Sundays. Oh, cool. And part of that is that same thing is this idea of doing something that has no, we're not getting an award for this. We don't tell people we do this. We just do it every Sunday morning. It's our church. I say it's our church. But it's the same thing about being grateful for everything we have and being able to think, and for us, like you said about advice and for us, one of the things I learned as I've grown up is that the best way to feel better, the best way to get over depression or not get over, but feel better about myself or feel better about the world is to do something for other people. And that's actually shown that that's the best form of antidepressant is that, just helping somebody and getting out of your own head. So what I love about yours is that it's every time you brush your teeth, because hopefully people are brushing their teeth at least 2 times a day. And so it's 2 times a day, you're forcing yourself to think about something that you're grateful for, which is really hard. Our kids have a lot in this world. And, sometimes it's easy to not be grateful, for things in this world.
Exactly. And it's to pick up, I picked up the behavior in my late 30s. I can imagine what it would have been like if I was doing this when I was 9 or 10.
Well, just think, yeah, just, I mean, just even thinking about other people is really, it's putting yourself in other people's shoes, like empathy, which, our president doesn't necessarily have a lot of empathy for. But I think that's a really important skill, right? I mean, I remember recently me and my son were walking around, like my neighborhood at like 6:15 in the morning. We finished our run. We were walking like kind of in a really nice part of the neighborhood. And I was like, if we were black men running around at 6:15 in the morning, we would probably be stopped by the police already. And just think about, like, I mean, we're Asian, so we're some parts of it, like, we probably wouldn't be okay in America, but in LA, we're fine running around as Asian people at 6:15 in the morning when it's still relatively dark. But, like, you have to think about other people who don't, have that ability. All right. Well, I love that advice. So what's your next piece of advice?
Okay. This is another one that I've been doing quite a bit is, I'm sure a lot of people have heard the adage, like, nothing in life is losing. It's either a lesson or it's a win, right? And so every time you lose, you actually learn from it. And I noticed, as with him being younger, and he cares so much about, impressing me, like he'll lie or blame rather than take accountability for the things that are his fault, right? So I think, like, the other piece of advice would be, like, just, the quicker that you can get to being accountable for everything that happens, right? The quicker that you can get to making sure that there's no losing in life, because you're either winning or learning from every experience, because anytime things don't go exactly the way you wanted, you can always go back and think about what you could have done differently.
Yeah.
And maybe it doesn't change the outcome, but you can at least improve on your approach every single time.
I love, and this is the number one thing that I work with my son about, on trying to take accountability and that it's okay to lose, but that's, and it's Billy All, like, I've sent you Billy All's book stuff, but, like, one of my favorite things from him, and every episode I'm going to mention this, so this is this time for this episode, is that he always says, and one of the things that I really took to heart is that he says it's easy for a winner to keep it going when they're winning a lot.
Yeah.
But the real winner, the real champion, is when you get knocked down once and you lose and you come back and win again. That's what a real champion is, because, and I love that, because it's so true. It's that, it's losing is not losing. It's just an opportunity to keep winning. It's an opportunity to learn more about yourself and get better at whatever you're trying to, whether that's sports or life or whatever, right? School, I mean, that's like the biggest challenge right now, I think. And sports, kids sports too, is like having that challenge right now, because a lot of them, until like now, my son's not even having, there's no scores and stuff. And I think that's a shame, because I think that losing is a good skill to learn, but it's also a good way to, like, measure yourself. I know some parents take it too far and, like, go crazy. But
no, it's absolutely true. It's like that saying was, like, the teacher's lost more than the student has even ever tried.
Yeah.
It's like that experience is the greatest thing that you can ever gain.
Yeah.
Right. And also to see, even if for keeping score in sports, if you're losing by less, that's a mark of improvement that you otherwise wouldn't be able to capture or measure.
Yeah. I mean, I remember the first jiu-jitsu tournament my son was at. He was fighting for third place, and then he lost. And then at the medal ceremony, he didn't get a medal. It's the first, like, thing he didn't get a medal in. Right. And I was like, yeah, you won that last match that I think you could have won. You would have got third place, but you didn't, so you're not going to get shit. And it was like, and I was like, now you like, you want to win, like, you got to start to train. And then, even showing him, like, I remember at practice, he'd be messing around. He'd, like, be smiling and taking it easy on kids that he knew he could beat. And I'm like, I took videos and pictures of him, and I'm like, hey, look at this. Look how you're acting. You think you can go to a tournament and win? Like, these kids are, like, trying to kill you at tournaments, and you're messing around at practice. Like, you can mess around after practice. You can mess around before. I don't care. I don't want you to, it's not like you're serious. You need to be serious all the time. But when you're practicing, you need to practice like you want to win, and it took losing for him to realize that, for him to get better, that if he never lost, it would just be like, he could just mess around for the rest of his life, Man, and accountability. How do you teach accountability, though? Do you have any ideas on how to do that?
He's young. I've always gone with, like, either if you do something that you want to lie about because you don't want the punishment, if I catch you lying, then that punishment's going to be way worse than what it is. You're trying to,
but does that work, though?
I look at him weird and I say, are you sure? And then, I do like the Larry David size up that he doesn't care. To see how he reacts. And I've gotten a few confessions out of it, so I don't know how much I'm losing, so I don't know.
Well, I tell him, I recently told him, I'm like, if he got in a fight at school, I'm going to go and defend him, the principal, to like everything I could possibly do. But he needs to tell me the truth. So if I'm lying for him, I need to know I'm lying for him. I don't want to go in there and be like, and find out later that I was obviously lying, because that makes me feel worse, right? That at least if I know I'm going in lying, that I'll defend you no matter what, but you need to be truthful to me so that I'm not going to get called out later for lying. And think that I was being honest. Like, that's the worst, right? Is like, you think you're being like real, but then, I don't know.
Take the Johnny Carpenter approach to parenting.
Yeah, exactly. Well, I think
nice defense lawyer. Got it.
I think it's always interesting to, like, these school rules are crazy sometimes. I think that they're madness. It's like one of my,
they just want to avoid all liability.
Yeah, like one of my friends' kids was like getting picked on, and like they would go to the principal and they go to the teacher, and like everyone's like, "Oh, this is a zero tolerance school. Nobody's getting bullied." And like, yet every day for like a couple weeks, is like money was getting stolen for lunch. So finally, like at jujitsu practice, we're like, "All right, next time he does this is what you're gonna do to him." And then they practiced it out, they role played it, they did it. Next time he did it, he didn't hurt the kid, but he brought the kid down, put him in a thing, and then like that kid stopped doing it. Good. And then and then the dad was like, he went to the principal, he's like, "Hey, there's no bullying here." Like my son didn't do anything. There's no bullying. It's no talk. And then I was like, yeah, see, like it's anyway, sorry. This is a touchy subject.
We can talk about this offline. Yeah. That's funny.
All right. Well, what's the next piece of advice?
So I think I've noticed, like, the older we get, the more our peer group gets more and more like closed-minded, kind of like they feel like they know it all. And I also see that, like, I see their soul like aging faster as a result, right? And I kind of feel like one of the easiest ways to stay young in life is like find something to learn every day and find something to laugh about every day, and between those two, it's kind of like, it's almost telling him to keep that spark that he has now, because life's going to kind of dull it out. It's going to rub you down a little bit. And just make sure that you keep that energy of like, I don't know it all, I want to learn more. And this shit's really funny. Like, life is hilarious, Yeah. And keeping like that type of mindset is exactly what you're born into this world with. Because you have so much to learn and you laugh very easily. And then the older you get, the more you move away from that.
Yeah. I mean, it's like when people say, "Oh, it used to be better." And I'm like, when was it better? Like in the 80s, my bosses were using Coke during lunch. They had their dealers visiting them. Like, now, if your boss did Coke, you'd be like, they'd be out of HR like in like 1 minute, right? Like, or I was watching Poltergeist recently, and there's like this 12-year-old girl, and she was being like harassed by the construction guys, and they were like making comments. And I was like, wait, you could do that? And the mom was right there watching and laughing, and I'm like, oh wait, this is this is when it was better? This is when it was better, when you could like harass a 12-year-old girl and make sexual comments toward them.
And watch movies from the 60s and 70s. Everything's super rapey.
Oh yeah, of course. Yeah.
So it's like, who?
Yeah, but like people of color and other groups of people is definitely worse. But even for regular white people, it's like, it wasn't better, dude. It was never. I mean, like, my big thing's always been that, the baby boomers had more sex, more drugs, more TV time, more screen time than any other generation since. And yet somehow it's like these kids are worse. But yeah, here's a question: How do you teach them to be not grateful, but how do you teach them to keep that spark instead of getting it beat down out of them?
Well, I think, and it's reinforced in our interactions on a regular basis. Every time Abe and I have a conversation and we come to a question we don't know, I always say, if only there was a device in your pocket that could answer everything you wanted to know, right? So he's gotten really good at just Googling everything nonstop. Anytime he has a question, like, he'll go to there. And the laughter thing is, I mean, we just talk a lot of shit, man. Like, we laugh at each other and ourselves a lot. So I don't know how to teach that, because it's kind of more of like, it goes back to something you said earlier about success is just your ability to keep standing up and trying again, right? And I think that's the easiest way to do that, is to continue to have that same spark and mindset, right?
Yeah.
It's really when you lose those things where this isn't fun anymore, I'm no longer interested, I'm fucking done, right? And so, I don't know how to teach it as a lesson. It's more of just, maybe I need to teach him the importance of why I think they're important, right? Like the value behind these things. Because right now we just do it. It's just how we exist. Like it's our interaction.
Well, for me, I think we talk a lot about, passion and what you want to do, and the challenge is obviously he's my son's 8, so he doesn't know what he wants to do, but it's like, teaching him like about like that, like, a job where you're doing something you love feels different than a job that you're forced to do because you have to do it because there's no other
100%.
choice, and really thinking about like trying to find, like, I wish, as a kid that I would spend more time thinking about things, about my future, what I kind of like, exploring different places more, like not physical places, but what I wanted to be and who I wanted to be.
For sure.
And I think that's what I'm trying to do with him a little bit, but it's obviously really hard because he's.
How do you do that?
Well, I think it's exposing him to different things, putting him in different situations. I'm trying not to like, as good as he is at jiu-jitsu and baseball, I'm trying not to like focus on that.
Right.
There's like, there has to be other stuff going on in his life that is, even if he's not as good, like I always say, like basketball, my son is good at, but he has to work to be like a good player.
Right.
Like he has to work really hard. Like he was like the worst player for a while, and then he worked really hard and became like one of the better players on the team. But then, if he had to work hard, but like baseball or jiu-jitsu, he doesn't have to work nearly as hard to be good. And so, but I want him to like not necessarily just go to those things. I want him to try all these, like soccer, he's terrible, but I think it's fun to be like, I think it's good for him to be on a soccer team. I think it's good for him to feel, the differences and not just sports, but like activities and stuff, although he's hesitant to do a lot of other stuff other than sports.
That's funny. Aiden kind of has that same dichotomy where there's a handful of things that he's just naturally gifted at.
Yeah.
And there's a few that it's just, it doesn't go well the first time. He used to get frustrated when he was younger. And I would always just tell him, well, yeah, I mean, the only way to get better is practice. And the cool thing is the next time you do it, you're going to be better than you were this time.
Yeah.
Right. And it's like, that's kind of like the push forward.
Yeah. Well, even, the big thing I push Takao in is that at jiu-jitsu, I would notice that he's fighting like all the kids he knew he could win. And I was like, no. You should pick the people that you think that you can't win, and then go hard and then try to beat them.
Right.
Because and that's a true sign that you're pushing yourself and becoming, that you're okay. I'm like, if you lose, he's better than you anyway, or he's bigger than you, or he's stronger than you, or he's done it longer. Like, it's okay to lose, but then when you win, like, it's like chess now. Actually it's funny because we're playing chess now, and it's like, my joke to him now is I have to think that before, and he beat me a couple times.
He's beat you?
Yeah, he's beat me. And
he beat you once.
Yeah, but he beat me because like I'm not thinking about things, but it's like, but still, like I'm like, hey, that's how you're gonna get better. Like I get worse, you get better because I'm playing you. Like
you could have not thought, well, he played me just once, man.
Well, actually, he has this funny side story. He has some funny like last game he beat me, which was yesterday. He just complained so much. He was whining and crying about it's not crying, but he was whining that I just stopped thinking. And all of a sudden, I made this terrible move. and he took my queen, and then he won. And I was like, "Wait, was that your strategy? Was to be so annoying that I just was like, whatever. I just made a move, and he beat me."
That was awesome. That's awesome.
All right.
Can I tell you a shitty Aiden strategy you pulled on me before we get back to this? He wanted to play this game with me. It's Naruto. It's like a 3D fighting game on the Xbox. And so, we pick our characters. He beats the shit out of me, and he played with a girl. And I was like, oh, that's cool. I beat Street Fighter 2 as Chun-Li, and talking all the attributes. He's like, Dad, I picked her because she's in a bikini, and I know you're going to look at her. I'm like, you're a jerk, dude.
Lose?
Yeah, I beat my ass.
Okay.
Yeah.
Just want to make
sure.
I
mean, he beats me that game all the time anyway. He's just really good at it.
Okay. Well, what's the next piece of advice?
This is one I picked up in management. When I started having really large teams, and especially inexperienced employees, where there's I give an X and Y axis, right? And I asked them to graph, two things. On one axis, you graph how important is this thing that, that's taking up all my time. And on the other axis is how urgent is it? And the thing I was trying to show them is if they have multiple to-dos, all they're really focusing on is urgency. Right? It's like, oh, I need this done today, so I can't think about something that's due next week. And so I was trying to show them, here's all the time, here's all the very important stuff that isn't super urgent that you're actually letting slide and you're not making progress on. And really, work will always be so busy that the urgent ones always get most of the attention, and as as I'm teaching it to them, I'm learning for myself, like, this is true of things in life anyway, right?
Yeah.
And urgency may not necessarily be like a deadline, but it's like the things I owe somebody else, maybe I have more of a debt towards the things that I owe myself, right? So am I spending enough time on my own stuff, things like that. But just being able to balance so that you're not solving for just one variable, but rather seeing both.
I love that. It's kind of like every email seems important because then you have like thousands of emails, right? That you need to respond to. That's why when I was working more corporate stuff, I used to my staff, I instituted this thing called True Work. So it was the idea that once a day for an hour, you couldn't check email, you couldn't take calls, couldn't take a meeting, and you just had to sit out of your office and sit and write and do work that is related to the work you're supposed to be doing. And I found that in that hour, I got more work done than I did all day. Because all day it's like a phone ringing, I have a meeting, I check my Facebook, I'm emailing, I'm doing everything but my actual job. In that 1 hour, I was able to really get like stuff done, right? Because I was not being interrupted. I was not, I was not being challenged in different ways. I think those kids though nowadays have a better sense of because there's so many more things happening. I think in a lot of ways they're better able to like I saw kids at Starbucks before this whole pandemic thing where, they're talking to their friends, they're doing homework, and they're like Instagramming at the same, like they're doing all these things at one time because that's just part of how they grew up, right?
Yeah, they look like Hindu gods. So like, how many heads do you really have?
Exactly.
Yeah, but that one actually, the other thing I liked about that one is because it also showed them and me that sometimes you just focus on the easy to do, so you can start marking things off your list.
Yeah.
Right? Like, oh yeah, I took care of these 4 things today. I'm like, each took 5 minutes. Come on.
Yeah.
There's this really big project I got you working on for next month. Like, how much time did you get to spend here?
Yeah.
So it's urgency, but it also ends up being like you're also picking the easy ones, or you're finding what you're trying to avoid on your.
Yeah. Well, I think that's good for school too, right? In that, you have to like if you spend every, if you have a essay or something and you're only waiting till the last day to write it,
right?
That's gonna be harder than if you spent like, an hour a week on it or something, or a couple hours a week on it and then getting it done beforehand,
Right. Exactly. So last one I wanted to talk about is financial literacy. And this is really just more of something I saw in college. Like, I remember freshman year of college, like, we'd all take the same walk to and from the classes from the dorms, and friends would come back with like a free water bottle or a free t-shirt because they signed up for a new credit card.
Yeah.
Like that, right? Whereas like, I already had known like the importance of avoiding going into debt without a doubt because the interest associated with it. So when I turned 16, my dad sat me down and he said, "Hey, would you rather drive like a Honda Accord or a Mercedes E-Class?" And I'm like, "I'll take the Benz, of course." He's like, "Do you realize that they cost the same?" I'm like, "What are you talking about?" And so he broke down to me what an amortization table looks like, right? And like the payments and things like that. He's like, "Here's how much a Benz would cost if you paid cash for it today, right? Here's how much a Honda Accord would cost if you financed it over 5 years." And so then if you take the amortization table out and the present value, the time value of money, then you'll see that the amounts are roughly the same. And so that just showed me like how much more buying power you have when you avoid debt.
Yeah.
But even that simple lesson, like I have friends today that still don't know about that or can't fully encapsulate or are okay with just paying the minimum amount due on their credit cards, like thinking that that's making progress,
Yeah.
And so when I think about like things that are taught, is necessary education going all the way through high school, and the big glaring gap that I think most people would actually use on a day-to-day basis, it's financial literacy, and so thinking of the right ways to start imprinting that knowledge into Aiden, especially as he starts working part-time and things like that.
Yeah. How are you doing that?
Right now we haven't done it at all, other than I just how stupid debt is all the time, right?
Yeah.
But because he hasn't gotten to algebra yet, I think once he gets into algebra, it'll be a lot easier to explain, things like interest and compound interest, APR, et cetera, right? And from there, I think we can jump off. But I mean, he understands like investing is good. Like you can work less if you can make your money work for you, right? And really just having that independence.
I mean, we spend a lot of time, like we don't pay for chores. Chores are part of like what you do.
Yeah.
Like as a human being. So we don't believe in that. We don't believe in paying for good grades or rewarding for that. We are very much like we give allowance. We give it $1 allowance. and I'm trying to get him to like understand that he could save money. So, it's challenging, but this culture is about taking on debt, right? I mean, look at our president. He's like,
Yeah.
I don't even know how much money he really has at this point, right? I mean, so much like debt, so much other equity debt. And,
yeah, but he doesn't have to pay his debt, right? That's
yeah.
how he does it.
Yeah, exactly.
LLC. Maybe we'll teach Aiden who's starting on LLC. Everything else can come together after that.
Well, I guess, but also Trump was playing with other people's money. So I think it's a little bit different, right? Than then he's not personally going in debt because he just was like, well, I'm going to go bankrupt then.
So let's make Stoker an LLC. That's how we're going to start. I'm lazy after that.
But I agree with you. I think people don't, I do think people don't know enough about, money and I mean, I think that's probably one of the biggest problems with our country now, right?
Right.
It's just that people are so much in debt.
And if you aren't in debt, because look, what we learned in this last administration, hopefully it's just the last time with this administration, is that this stuff isn't no one's going to take care of you, but the economy is growing if you can find a way to participate.
Yeah.
Right. So for the middle class or, even the upper middle class, buying into stocks is a way that you get to at least share. That's the only way this shit really trickles down is if you take ownership in things, and stocks is a great way of doing that. But you can only do that if you have disposable income, or if you understand, here's the tax-free or tax-deferred accounts I can participate in up to a certain amount, right? To set up for my own retirement. There's ways to accumulate wealth and grow your wealth that you can participate in, but A, you need to have the disposable income. So B, you got to make sure that you avoid the debt, and then C, you need to have the education of knowing where to put what.
Yeah.
Right.
I mean, what's the stat? I think 40% of people in America couldn't come up with $500 cash in 24 hours. It's that says a lot about, where we are as an economy. Even when the economy was going well, I mean, I thought it was a fake good economy because it just, so much of the economy is about just spending money and what happens when you can't spend money, like now.
Right. And so even though when you saw GDP was down, high 30% for last quarter, but the stock market's barely down off its high prior to, the quarantine starting.
Yeah.
So, there's places where wealth still exists.
Yeah, no, rich. The rich will always get rich. What is I think the stat in the last 25 years, the top 1% has grown by 20% in terms of overall wealth or something like that. Yeah. I have a lot of theories on that, but yeah, I do think that I think that there is a place in school to learn more about, how to take care of your money, how to make money. But also at the same time, I feel like, this might be a bigger fundamental problem, is that it's hard nowadays to even be able to afford a lot of the places, for example, in South Pasadena, a small 2-bedroom house here is 1.25 now, that's like a condo. Right.
Yeah.
So, it's I think the place is just, a lot of the place, of course, if you live in other places, it's going to be a little bit easier, but then there's less jobs. So
that might be one positive thing that comes out of this whole situation is now, people aren't tethered to an actual physical location for work anymore.
Yeah. Do you think that's going to change? Do you think that's going to be the way it's going to be?
I think for skilled labor, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. I think there's a lack of trust with unskilled labor, unfortunately.
Well, of course, because
if you're not there, then you're not doing it.
Yeah, well, because if you work at a hotel, you have to kind of be at the hotel, or if you work at a restaurant, you kind of have to be at the restaurant.
Right.
But that was always the biggest problem with the economy.
Even telemarketing, right?
Yeah.
I don't know how much of that will be a work at home, right?
Well, that's going to be AI. That's totally going to be AI. Google, what was it? Not Google Voice, but there's that Google app that basically people couldn't tell the difference between the real person and Google.
Wow.
That came out recently.
Well, one of them was a better listener.
One doesn't get mad at you.
Exactly.
But it's, those are the kinds of things I think that, that's my biggest worry about the economy now, is that I think that with the economy going down, it's we don't really need 20 people. We never really needed 20 people. We only needed 8. And then all of a sudden, what happens to those other 12 people? There's just no. But that's why, to kind of grow on to go off your advice a little bit, that's why one of the things I want to teach my son is about being creative, and not creative like writing like me, but being able to think, because no matter how much automation happens, the thing that you'll always need the next person to come up with Google, or the next person to come up with the next Facebook or TikTok or whatever. That's
Right.
the kind of creative you need to be able to be successful in the environment. You know, even lawyers, I think, are going to be replaced because they found that AI lawyers are actually better than the actual lawyers, and they're cheaper. And
Wow.
because it's all documents, right? It's all just reading fine print, right?
Smart, yeah.
You don't need a person to necessarily, and they don't fucking, lawyers don't even read the fine print anyway, right? They use the same document. But I think being creative is something that, you know, being able to think outside the box and to try to come up with stuff. That's the thing I'm trying to do. I don't know how to do it yet, but that's my goal.
I mean, and I agree with you, because it's like, you know, every time like this evolution as far as like how we work or what we're working on takes place, there's then been a movement of creating, so what's the next wave, right? We've always, like, all the free time we've gotten back through like automation, not like automation of jobs like now, but we're talking about, you know, like the industrial revolution or putting things on a conveyor belt, right? And the specialization of roles, like even the efficiencies we've gained from shifts like that have led to us coming up with other things to do, right?
Yeah.
So I think you're right. Like instilling that creativity and that focus on creativity really allows you to be the one at the forefront of things like that.
Yeah, to be able to come up with that next thing, because there's always going to be, you know, no matter like if UBI or any of that stuff ever became reality, there's always going to be rich people. There's always going to be owners, right? There's always going to be the super class that's making that thought of everything that made that.
Or at least funded it after someone else thought of it. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, you know, at least, but then they will usually join that super class, right, of people.
Sure.
But anyway, thank you so much. It was really awesome to hear this advice. I think hopefully my son listens to this at some point in the future and enjoys it. But thank you so much, Max. And thank you everyone for listening. We really appreciate your listening. The one thing I'm going to tell everybody for this week is to tell one friend about Guy Code and tell them one piece of advice that you heard from this show that will help you in the future, or help your kid or help whoever you're thinking of, probably yourself. But anyway, tell one friend about it. It'll be really great. And then make sure they subscribe to this podcast. So thank you again, Max.
It's good. Appreciate it, man.
And thank you again for everybody for listening, and peace out, guys. Look at my fingers. All right. Bye.
Later.